It started at Christmas. One room, one family, and one secret that burned hotter than the fire in that fireplace. They thought I was weak. They were wrong. What happened next? You won't forget. My name is Melanie. I'm 34 years old, and this is how I stopped letting their approval decide my worth. Before I continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. That Christmas in Lexington was bitter cold. Not just outside, inside too. The kind of cold that slides under your skin when you realize your own family can make a room feel lonelier than any empty house. The living room glowed with tree lights and expensive ornaments. Dana, my sister, posed near the fireplace, her new designer purse propped where everyone could see it. Scott bragged about the 85-inch TV he'd installed for Mom and Dad. Even his teenagers were showing off the latest phones like trophies. I came in with 3 small bags. Nothing fancy, just little things I'd made and wrapped myself. For a second, the noise dipped. Dana's smile turned tight. "Oh, wow," she said, sugary sweet. "You brought presents?" Scott chuckled from the couch. "Hit up Dollar Tree again, huh?" Mom sighed like she'd been expecting disappointment. Some people just don't try. I sat near the window, coat still on, pretending to watch the snow fall. Their laughter floated around me. Perfume, wine, the click of heels on hardwood. And every sound reminded me how far away I was from belonging. But I'd brought those gifts for a reason. Each one had an envelope tucked inside. Not revenge, just truth. Notes I'd written over months, things I needed to say before I could let them go. Scott's daughter opened hers first. "What's this?" she asked. "A letter," I said. "From me." Scott frowned but didn't stop her. Dana opened hers next, scanning the page until her voice softened. Mom hesitated, then unfolded hers too. The letters weren't about money or inheritance. They were about memories. About being the kid who stayed home with Grandma when everyone else went to parties. About helping Mom pay bills when the others couldn't be bothered. About how I'd spent years believing I wasn't enough because they treated me that way. For the first time all night, nobody spoke. The fire hissed, a log collapsed, and in that quiet I felt something shift. Not in them, in me. Dana's eyes watered. Scott stared at the floor. Mom looked older, smaller somehow. I realized I didn't need them to apologize. I just needed to finally say the words out loud. "I'm not angry," I told them. "I'm done trying to earn a seat at this table. Grandma taught me how to see worth in people, not price tags. I think she'd want me to remember that tonight." I set the last untouched gift on the table and stood. My coat felt heavy, but my chest didn't. "Where are you going?" Mom asked, quietly. "Home," I said. "Where it's warm." I walked to the door. Outside, snowflakes landed on my sleeves and melted fast. The air stung, but it felt clean, like the first deep breath after years of holding one in. They laughed when I walked in. Thought I was still the quiet one they could measure by receipts and labels. But when I walked out, they weren't laughing. And for once, that didn't matter at all. I don't think they even heard the door close behind me. That's how stunned they were. The sound of it, soft, final, hung in my head longer than any of their laughter ever had. My boots crunched on the frozen driveway, the snow squeaking under each step like a small protest. Across the street, the neighbors' porch lights blinked in perfect rhythm, red and white, as if the rest of the world had decided to keep moving no matter what exploded in that house behind me. Funny how life does that. You can break a lifetime of patterns in one night, and somewhere across town people are still pouring cocoa and watching the same old Christmas movies. The air bit through my scarf, clean and sharp. I sat in the car with my hands on the wheel, letting the heater hum even though the engine wasn't on. My breath fogged the glass. I wasn't crying. Not this time. The tears had dried years ago, after enough holidays spent in the folding chair near the kitchen doorway, after enough pity gifts wrapped in last year's paper, after enough artsy one jokes that really meant the failure. Grandma never called me that. She'd look over her glasses and say, "Still water runs deep, honey, and you? You're the whole damn ocean." When she got sick, I was the one who learned what that meant. I drove her to chemo, sat through hours in those beige waiting rooms that always smelled faintly of sanitizer and fear. I filled pill organizers, fought with insurance reps, made soup that never tasted like hers but made her smile anyway. Scott said it was too hard watching her fade. Dana claimed hospitals made her itch. They sent flowers. Once. Twice. Mostly they sent silence. I was there when Grandma's breathing turned shallow and slow. I counted every inhale like a prayer. When the last one came, I pressed her hand to my cheek and whispered that she could rest now. 3 weeks later, the lawyer called, said he had something for me. I thought it was paperwork. Final bills, donation forms, the usual mess that follows loss. Instead, he slid a thick envelope across his desk. My name was written in her shaky handwriting. Inside were copies of deeds, a small pile of savings bonds, a modest life insurance policy, and one note in blue ink across the top page. Don't let them guilt you into giving it back. It didn't feel like a windfall. It felt like responsibility, like she'd handed me a torch that burned hot and heavy. For a while, I couldn't even look at it. I tucked it in my desk drawer and went back to my freelance gigs, my secondhand apartment, my quiet routines. Then the family group text started. Scott: "Let's go big this year. No cheap fillers." Dana: "High-end gifts only. We're adults." Mom: "No nonsense. Make it classy." I almost deleted the thread. I wasn't going to go. But grief does strange things. It makes you want closure you know you won't get. So I told myself I'd show up, say hello, maybe prove that I could stand in that house without shrinking. I remembered last Christmas, when I'd painted Mom's garden from memory, the way the lilacs curved toward the fence, the chipped birdbath she loved. Dana had laughed. "She brings handmade stuff like we're on Etsy." Everyone chuckled. Mom set the painting aside and never hung it. That memory hit harder than any insult. That was the night I promised myself I'd stop auditioning for their approval. I didn't plan revenge. I planned boundaries. I gathered the papers Grandma left, proof not of what I owned, but of what she believed in. She'd trusted me to handle her legacy with care, not with guilt. I made copies, sealed them in envelopes, and wrote short letters to go with each one. They weren't threats. They were explanations. The truth. That she'd left things in my name because I'd been there when it counted, not because she loved them less. On Christmas Eve, I tucked those envelopes into small gift bags with socks and candy canes. Something about the mix of ordinary and serious felt right, like life itself. They mocked me, as always. But when they opened those envelopes, the noise died. And after I left, that silence stayed behind like smoke. Now, sitting in the car, I replayed their faces. Dana's disbelief, Scott's anger, Mom's confusion, and underneath it all, the same old question. Was I wrong? The phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Once, twice. I didn't look. I drove home through empty streets, the radio low, the city washed in orange streetlight. When I parked outside my apartment, I let the engine idle until the heat ran out. Inside, I lit a candle Grandma had given me years ago. The label said Cinnamon Knoll, and it smelled like her kitchen. I sat on the couch, phone in my lap, waiting for the guilt to arrive. It didn't. The next morning, the texts came. Scott: "We need to talk." Dana: "Call me, please." Mom left a voicemail. No words, just breathing and the slam of a cabinet door. I let them wait. A day passed, then two, then 3. My stomach stopped nodding every time the phone buzzed. Finally, I sent one message to the group. Me. The documents are real. They're filed. You can contact the estate attorney for confirmation. Then silence again. An hour later. Scott. So you're really keeping everything? No apology. No warmth. Just the same entitlement that had always filled their voices when they talked about Grandma's things, as if her love could be itemized. Stared at the screen, typed, deleted, typed again. Me. Grandma made a choice. I'm honoring it. That's all. A minute later, Dana replied. Dana. She wasn't in her right mind. You took advantage. I closed my eyes. The old doubt tried to crawl back in. Every childhood memory of being the tag-along, the afterthought. But then I heard Grandma's voice again. Still water runs deep. They weren't mourning her. They were mourning control. The way they'd always decided who mattered and who didn't. That realization didn't make me triumphant. It made me sad. Because I finally understood that some people can't love you unless you're smaller than they are. That night, I opened a new document on my laptop and wrote everything down. Dates, receipts, her letters, memories of hospital visits. Not to defend myself, but to remember the truth when the guilt tried to rewrite it. Outside, snow tapped against the window. I made cocoa, curled up with a blanket, and read Grandma's note again. The ink had faded a little, the paper soft from being handled too much. Don't let them guilt you into giving it back. I whispered, I won't, Grandma. But what I meant was bigger. I won't give back my peace. I won't hand over the confidence it took 34 years to build. Over the next week, calls trickled in. Mom tried small talk. Dana wanted to clear the air. Scott asked if I could at least split the property. I told them all the same thing. I'm open to healing, not bargaining. They didn't understand the difference, but I did. Sometimes power doesn't look like winning. It looks like walking away without slamming the door, like sleeping through the night for the first time in years, like finding yourself humming in the kitchen on a random Tuesday. I still drive past that old family house sometimes. The porch light burns late, same as always. Maybe one day they'll call for reasons that have nothing to do with money. Maybe they won't. Either way, I'm okay. Because I finally learned that you can't control how people remember you. You can only control how you live with what they forget. They didn't even show up for the memorial. Not when it mattered. Grandma's church was half empty that morning. A few neighbors, the pastor, one of her old friends from the library. I remember the smell of lilies and lemon polish, the way the light came through those narrow stained glass windows and landed right on the photo I'd picked of her. Smiling, head tilted, coffee mug in hand. Scott and Dana had both texted excuses, travel issues, kids have finals. Mom said she couldn't handle another loss right now. But now? Now that there were bank accounts, properties, papers with my name typed neatly at the top, suddenly everyone found the time. It started with an email from Dana, a spreadsheet, color-coded. She'd titled it Collaborative Property Use Proposal. It listed shared memories from Grandma's cabin in Asheville with actual dollar values next to each one, like nostalgia had a market rate. She'd even highlighted her name in yellow, under primary contact. At the bottom, she'd written, I just think it's fair that since we all made memories there, we should co-own the space. I stared at the screen for a long minute, equal parts angry and tired. I could almost hear her voice in my head, that same performative calm she used whenever she wanted something. I drafted a reply, deleted it, drafted another. Finally, I sent one sentence. Thanks for your input, Dana. The cabin is part of a legally designated estate trust. No shared ownership is possible. A clean, professional no. Scott reached out next. Hey, There's some old stuff of mine in the storage units. Mind if I swing by Saturday? I typed back. All property retrieval must be coordinated through the estate attorney. Please don't access the units directly. I didn't raise my voice, didn't add attitude, but I knew that single word, attorney, would sting. They hated when I spoke in the language of boundaries. They wanted the old Melanie who backed down the moment anyone sounded disappointed. Not this version. This version had spent nights reading through estate codes until her eyes blurred. This version kept every receipt, every tracking number. I mailed certified copies of Grandma's plan to each of them, signatures and notary seals in plain sight. It felt strange, clinical, but also freeing. For once, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. A few days later, Mom called. The first time in months. "Melanie," she said softly, "I just don't understand why you'd keep everything from your own family." Her voice wobbled in that practiced way that used to pull me in. I could hear the clink of dishes in the background, the hum of the TV. Home, but not warmth. "Grandma trusted me," I said. "That's why." She wasn't thinking clearly. "You know how soft she got near the end? She always had a soft spot for you." Maybe because I was the only one who showed up. The silence that followed had weight. I could almost see her pressing her hand to her forehead like she always did when she ran out of lines. Then came the real reason. We were counting on some of that money for our retirement. Not a question. A statement, thick with expectation. Something inside me went still. I looked at the small stack of envelopes on my kitchen table, bills, rent, utilities, and thought about how many nights I'd stretched a paycheck while taking care of Grandma. "I'm sorry," I said finally. "That's not something I can fix." Click. The line went dead. After that, the days turned too quiet. Snow melted, refroze, and the streets went gray again. I kept working. Small design jobs, invoices, the steady rhythm of my own life. Until Christmas photos started popping up on Facebook. Dana by the fireplace, hair perfect, captioned, "Family is everything, grateful for real love this year." Scott with his kids opening presents, blessed to give them the Christmas they deserve. I scrolled once, twice, and froze. Every picture that had included me was cropped, even the group shot before dinner. Just a strange, blank space where I'd been standing, like I'd never existed. I didn't comment, didn't like or react. I just saved the posts into a folder called False Narratives. It wasn't petty, it was clarity. A record of how easily people rewrite reality when truth makes them uncomfortable. They made themselves the heroes, made me the problem. But Grandma's handwriting still echoed in my head. "Don't let them guilt you into shrinking. You've already done your time." I read that line every night for a week. Some nights I cried, some nights I didn't. Always, I felt stronger by morning. Then came the letters. Scott's lawyer friend sent the first, an official-looking document accusing me of undue influence. Said Grandma had been mentally compromised. Dana followed with her own, claiming I was withholding sentimental items from the family. The words looked sharp on paper, but underneath I could hear the same old insecurity. "How dare you change the rules?" I forwarded both letters to the estate attorney. Within a day, he replied. Short, confident, full of codes and clauses. I could almost feel Grandma's spirit smirking somewhere above us. When I met with him that week, he explained the next step. "There's a trust provision your grandmother filed 3 years ago," he said. She was thorough. "It activates if anyone contests her wishes." I leaned forward. "Activates how?" She wrote a clause that nullifies any contested claim, meaning if someone challenges the will, they forfeit all rights to any remaining items or funds. It's airtight. I sat back, stunned. Not because she'd protected me, but because she'd anticipated them. She'd known exactly how this would go down. I thought about Dana's spreadsheets, Scott's texts, Mom's soft sighs. For the first time, I felt something close to peace. I hadn't taken anything from them. They'd just lost the chance to keep pretending they were owed. The lawyer filed the notice that afternoon. I watched him seal the envelope, drop it in the outbox, and stamp it with that loud, satisfying thud. Done. That night, I made tea and sat by the window while the snow fell again, the streetlights glowing like halos over empty cars. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, safe. They'd always said I was too emotional, too sensitive. Maybe that's true. But sensitivity isn't weakness. It's awareness. And for the first time, I was using it to protect myself instead of excuse them. Over the next week, more silence. No calls, no texts. Just absence. It used to terrify me. Now it felt like room to breathe. I cleaned the Hajj apartment, went through boxes of Grandma's things. Her scarf still smelled faintly of lavender. Her coffee tin held a note folded small. Mel, remember? The world will try to make you smaller. Don't let it. I pressed it to my heart and whispered, I won't. Later, I framed one of her old photographs, a picture of us laughing in front of the cabin, both windblown and ridiculous. It went on my wall right above the desk where I keep all the legal papers. Not as proof of ownership, but as proof of love done right, honest, imperfect, real. Sometimes I imagine Grandma watching the whole thing unfold with that knowing half smile. Not gloating, just proud that I finally understood what she'd been teaching me all along, that protecting what's yours isn't greed, it's gratitude in motion. I didn't have to fight anymore. I just had to keep standing. The lawyer called 2 weeks after the trust clause kicked in. His tone wasn't smug exactly, just amused, like he'd seen this same story play out 100 times before. Melanie, he said, flipping through papers, it seems your siblings didn't read the fine print. I could hear the faint rustle of documents on his desk. That crisp shuffle of paper against paper. Clean, final, deliberate. You're not required to distribute a single thing beyond what's written, he said. In fact, they've forfeited any moral claim too. Your grandmother was unusually thorough. I leaned back in my chair, the same wooden one I'd sat in beside Grandma's bed for all those long nights, feeding her applesauce, checking her oxygen, whispering stories to keep her calm. Thorough. Yeah, she'd been that. She didn't leave anything to chance. She used to tell me, if you give someone just enough rope, they'll show you who they are. And they did. Scott, Dana, Mom, they all showed me. Loud and clear. What they didn't expect, though, was that I'd have the backbone to follow through. They thought I'd cave, split it all up to keep the peace, play the good daughter, the grateful sister. But that version of me, the one who said, it's fine, through clenched teeth, she'd been buried right alongside Grandma. The woman sitting here now saw things for what they were. They didn't want me. They wanted access. To power. To property. To money. And when I stopped handing it out, they panicked. The first knock came on a Thursday evening. Cold rain hammered the sidewalk, and through the window I saw Scott's car half-parked in the driveway, wipers still going. He was wearing a windbreaker and that awkward half-smile he used when he needed a favor. Hey, he said, voice soft. Can we talk? I didn't open the screen door. I just looked at him through it. The rain streaking between us. About what? He shifted his weight, rubbed the back of his neck like we were still kids caught sneaking in past curfew. I know things got heated, but you gotta admit, this whole situation's kinda messed up. He sounded almost friendly, but his eyes were already measuring me, calculating the next angle. You tried to challenge Grandma's will, I said. You called me manipulative. He sighed. I was upset. We all were. But come on, Mel. You don't think this is a little overboard? I crossed my arms. No. I think it's fair. And legal. Exactly the way she wanted. He let out a dry laugh that cracked halfway through. You always were dramatic. You always thought I wouldn't notice. The words hung there between us, sharper than I meant them to be. His jaw tightened, the fake charm slipping. Look, he said finally, about those storage units. There's some old stuff of mine in there. Photos, baseball cards, whatever. Can I just grab it? It's personal. You'll have to make the request through the attorney, I said. They'll review everything first. He blinked, almost incredulous. Jesus, Melanie, it's not that serious. It is to me. I didn't slam the door. I just closed it slowly until the latch clicked. He stood there a second, maybe waiting for me to open it again, then turned and walked off into the rain. For once, his hands were empty. Dana tried a softer route. Emails this time, paragraphs about forgiveness and grace. She even quoted scripture at one point. We are all God's children. Love conquers all. I stared at the blinking cursor, feeling equal parts weary and sad. Then I typed back, where was that energy when you laughed at me in front of your kids last Christmas? No reply. Just a voicemail a day later. Her singing Silent Night, a little off-key, like guilt disguised as peace. Mom stayed quiet longest. That was her specialty. Silence as strategy. But I knew what was happening behind the scenes. Calls to Aunt Lynn, Cousin Robert, whispered versions of the story over coffee. She's just not herself since Mom passed, I imagined her saying. Poor thing's gotten mean, always so sensitive. Every time she rewrote the story, I lost a little more family, but I gained something steadier. Myself. Because here's what no one tells you about standing your ground. It's lonely. There's no applause, no music cue, no instant peace. Just quiet rooms and your own heartbeat reminding you that choosing yourself can sound a lot like silence, but that silence? It's honest. For the first time in my life, I wasn't balancing on scraps, emotional or otherwise. I had the deed, the documents, the savings, but it wasn't about owning things. It was about owning my story. The old me would have felt guilty for saying no. She would have called Scott back, tried to reason with Dana, begged Mom to understand. Now I just breathed. I let the rain wash over the windows and the phone buzz unanswered. Because I didn't feel vengeful. I felt clean. Not vindicated. Just finally seen. Grandma used to say, "You don't need to shout to be heard, honey. You just need to stop whispering." And that's what I'd done. I'd stopped whispering. I didn't need them to agree. I didn't need them to understand. I just needed them to stop taking. That was enough. I didn't hear from them again for months. No calls, no texts, just silence. But it wasn't peace. It was that heavy kind of silence that fills a house until the walls hum with it. The kind that keeps you half expecting a knock or a phone buzz that never comes. I lived in that quiet all winter and through most of spring. By March, the trees started showing green again, and I drove to Asheville to clear out Grandma's cabin. The air smelled like pine needles and wet dirt, the way it always did after rain. The place still carried her scent, lavender sachets in every drawer, cinnamon somewhere in the wood. Inside, time hadn't moved. Her slippers were by the rocker. A half-finished crossword sat on the kitchen table beside a mug that still had a lipstick ring on it. Sticky notes were everywhere, curling at the edges. Don't forget to cover the pie with foil. Turn the porch light off after 10. Keep going, baby girl. They'll never see you coming. That last one stopped me cold. It was taped to the inside of her Bible, next to a faded photo of me at 10, painting in the backyard with a brush too big for my hand. I sat on the floor, sunlight stretching across the boards, and for the first time in months, I cried. Not polite tears, the full, messy kind that come from somewhere deep. It wasn't just grief, it was release. Because right then I understood what she'd really given me. Not the cabin, not the accounts, not power. She'd given me strength, the kind that doesn't need to shout, the kind that holds steady when the rest of the world shakes. By June, the estate was finally closed. Papers signed, accounts settled, everything tidy. On paper, it all belonged to me now, but in my heart, it still felt like hers. Like I was just the caretaker of everything she'd built. Then one humid afternoon, an envelope landed in my mailbox. Handwritten in Dana's perfect cursive, 4th of July BBQ at Scott's. Bring your best dish and your best self. Family first. I laughed out loud, right there on the porch. Family first. They didn't mean me. They meant the version of me who smiled through insults, who brought homemade gifts and called them blessings. Still, something inside me said go. Not to argue, not to gloat. Just to prove to myself that I could walk into that space and stay whole. So I went. I wore jeans, boots, and the gold locket Grandma left me, the one Mom once called too gaudy. I parked in the driveway like I belonged there, because I did. The smell of charcoal and sweet tea hit me the second I stepped out. Kids shrieked in the yard. Music drifted from a speaker. Some country pop track about forgiveness and small towns. Dana was at the sink arranging watermelon slices. Scott stood at the grill flipping burgers like he'd been born for it. When they noticed me, the whole air shifted. "Melanie," Scott said, spatula hovering mid-air. "You made it." "You invited me," I said, calm, steady. Dana forced a smile. "We thought maybe it was time." I nodded. "Maybe it is." The house looked different, brighter, cleaner, but under it all the tension still pulsed. I set my tote bag on the counter and pulled out 3 envelopes, plain, sealed, neat. "I brought something," I said. Scott frowned. "What's this?" "An update." They exchanged looks, the kind that used to make me shrink. I didn't. I explained that the estate work was done, that everything was settled, every signature finalized. No surprises, no loopholes, just closure. Scott let out a slow breath. "So, you came all this way to tell us that?" "I came because I needed to look you in the eye and know we're done," I said. "No more guessing, no more paperwork, no more pretending we're okay if we're not." Dana's lip trembled. "We didn't mean to hurt you, Mel." I met her gaze. "You didn't mean to see me either. There's a difference." She blinked, and for once she didn't have a comeback. Scott set the spatula down, staring at the grill like it could give him answers. "So what now?" "Now we live," I said. "Separately, maybe, but without lies." He nodded once. Maybe he understood, maybe he didn't. But he didn't argue. That alone felt like progress. We stood there a moment, the 3 of us breathing the same thick July air. I could smell the smoke, the tang of barbecue sauce, hear kids laughing somewhere out back. The world kept spinning. I picked up a bottle of water, twisted the cap, took a sip. My throat felt raw, but my voice didn't shake when I finally said what needed saying. "This isn't revenge," I told them. "It's boundaries." That was the truth. The line between chaos and peace, between the family I was born into and the life I was choosing. No one stopped me when I turned to leave. No angry words, no last-minute plea, just quiet acceptance. Or maybe exhaustion. Either way, I'd take it. Outside, the sun was sliding low, washing the yard in gold. Fireflies blinked near the hedges, tiny lanterns in the humid dusk. I paused at my car, looked back through the window. Scott stood with his hands on the counter. Dana wiped her eyes, pretending to check her phone. For the first time, I didn't feel smaller than that house. I didn't feel like the forgotten one, the leftover. I just felt free. As I drove away, the fireworks started somewhere over the hill, distant pops of color flashing against the horizon. I rolled the window down, let the warm air hit my face, and smiled. It wasn't the ending I'd dreamed of, but it was real. And for the first time in years, that was enough. That August, I spent a full week alone at the cabin in Asheville. No family, no phone calls, just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty. It feels like recovery. The air was thick with that mountain sweetness, wood smoke and pine. Every morning, sunlight slipped through the windows and painted the floorboards gold. I cooked eggs in the same skillet Grandma used, the one with the tiny dent in the handle where she used to rest her spoon. After breakfast, I'd carry my coffee to the porch swing and just listen. Cicadas, wind, maybe a far-off car rolling down the gravel road. Sometimes I'd talk out loud to her, half laughing at myself. "You'd love this morning, Grandma. Fog in the trees again." And little by little, the noise in my head went still. It hit me one afternoon, sitting on those creaky boards with my sketchbook open. They hadn't been mourning Grandma. They'd been mourning control. The illusion that love was something they could manage, assign, withhold. When I stopped letting them define me, they lost their compass. I didn't take anything from them. I just stopped offering up pieces of myself for free. All those years, I'd believed love had to be earned, with the right clothes, the right tone, the right gift. I thought if I was careful enough, they'd finally see me. But Grandma saw me all along. She didn't love me because I tried. She loved me because I was hers, stubborn, creative, imperfect. And in the end, she left me something I never expected: permission to live on my own terms. The cabin wasn't wealth, it was trust, in wood and nails and handwriting. The savings accounts weren't money. They were proof that she believed I could handle whatever came next. The others went back to their versions of the story. Scott told cousins I'd lawyered up. Dana posted about forgiveness on her lifestyle blog, all pastel colors and curated smiles. Mom sent a letter. I recognized her handwriting right away. Tight loops, shaky edges. I read it standing at the kitchen counter. "I still don't understand what she saw in you, but it's done. I hope you're happy." We all lost something that day. Don't expect to be invited back. I folded it once, set it on the mantel, and thought about what that something was. Maybe it was the image of a daughter who'd never say no. Maybe it was the comfort of an old script they could keep replaying. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. That night, I built a fire in the old stone hearth and fed the letter to the flames. The paper curled and darkened, the ink lifting into tiny sparks. The smell was faintly sweet, like burned sugar. When it was gone, I felt lighter, like the house itself exhaled. After that, I started rebuilding, quietly. I cleaned every corner of the cabin, fixed the porch railing, sanded the kitchen table until the grain showed through again. I planted wildflowers along the edge of the yard: purple coneflower, black-eyed Susan, lavender. It became my morning ritual: coffee, sunlight, the sound of bees. By fall, I'd made a decision. I filed papers to turn the cabin into a small artist's retreat. Named it the Esther House, after Grandma. I made a website, designed the logo myself. A sketch of her old teapot with steam swirling into mountains. When the first two painters arrived that October, I handed them the keys and almost cried again. They were strangers, but somehow it felt like family done right. Quiet, respectful, creative. The kind of people Grandma would have welcomed with open arms. Part of the rental income went straight to a local women's shelter. It felt good, putting her generosity back into the world where it could grow. I painted again, too. Big, messy canvases, the Blue Ridge at dawn, fireflies at night, portraits of hands holding coffee cups. Every brushstroke felt like breathing. And somewhere in the middle of all that creating, I laughed again. The real kind. The kind that doesn't check who's listening. Sometimes I'd hear bits of news. Scott's business hit a slow season. Dana's marriage fell apart quietly, her blog posts turning vaguer, softer. Mom stopped showing up at garden club. Maybe they were struggling. Maybe they weren't. Either way, I wished them peace. Because healing doesn't mean hoping someone fails. It means you've stopped needing their approval to feel whole. One night, I sat outside on the porch with a blanket wrapped around me and watched a thunderstorm roll across the valley. Lightning flashed behind the ridge and the thunder came seconds later, deep and full. I thought about every fight I never had, every apology I never got, and I smiled anyway. Sometimes revenge looks like rage, but sometimes it's quieter than that. Sometimes it's peace so steady no one can shake it. Grandma used to say, "Still water runs deep." Sitting there, listening to the rain hit the tin roof, I finally understood what she meant. Strength doesn't shout. It doesn't need to prove itself. It just exists, calm and sure, beneath the surface. The next morning, I found one more note tucked behind an old photo frame. Her handwriting again, faded but clear. "Keep going, baby girl. The world needs what you have." I pressed it to my chest and whispered, "I will." And I meant it. I stayed through the end of the week, walked the trails she'd loved, cooked her cornbread recipe, painted until my fingers cramped. Each night I'd light a candle by the window and let the flame flicker while I wrote in my journal, not about loss, but about gratitude. By Sunday, the air had shifted. Cool, crisp, almost like fall. I locked the door, checked the porch one last time, and stood at the edge of the drive. The mountains rose behind me, endless and steady. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was leaving home. I felt like I was carrying it with me. I drove down the winding road with the windows open, the radio low, the scent of pine following me. Halfway to town, I caught myself smiling for no reason at all. I wasn't the girl who brought dollar store gifts anymore. I wasn't the one waiting for a seat at the table. I was the woman Grandma believed in. The one who finally understood that worth isn't something you inherit. It's something you grow into. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.